Welcome back, porch sitters. Today, we're stepping into one of the most extraordinary moments in human history, the Christmas Truce of World War I. Before we dive in, make sure to like, subscribe, and let's head back to a night when peace found a way into the middle of war. Okay, so take a look at this. This image captures a moment that honestly should never have happened. We're going to dive into the story of the Christmas Truce of 1914. It's this unbelievable tale of a single night right in the middle of one of the world's most brutal wars. When the fighting just stopped for a little while, war disappeared. Just let that sink in for a second. And you know, those words weren't written by some historian years later. They came from a German soldier who was actually there in a trench on that very night. His letter just perfectly captures the sheer magic and mystery of what was about to happen. Let's just set the scene. It's December 1914, and pretty much the entire world is at war. This was the Great War, World War I, and the level of violence was something nobody had ever seen before. For millions of young guys, this was their daily reality. Fighting and dying, so far from home, and that really brings us to the heart of this whole thing, doesn't it? In the middle of all that chaos and hatred, what would happen when the soldiers who were ordered to kill each other decide not to? What happens when they choose peace instead, even for just a moment? Alright, so to really get why this truce was so completely mind-blowing, you must understand just how awful things were. Let's talk about the grim reality of life. The trenches. You know, the craziest part is that everyone thought this war would be over by Christmas. Home by Christmas. That was the big slogan. But that's not what happened. By September, the whole thing had just ground to a halt. Armies literally dug themselves into the ground, creating these massive, muddy, frozen ditches. So, by December, these guys weren't heroes coming home victorious. They were just stuck, cold, exhausted, and absolutely miserable in between the two lines of trenches. What was this hellscape? They called it no man's land, and believe me, they weren't kidding. It was just a wasteland of barbed wire, mud, and shell craters. To go out there was pretty much a death sentence. So, remember that place because it's about to become the main stage for this entire story. Then on Christmas Eve, something happened. Something totally unexpected. It didn't start with an order from a general or some official treaty. It started with a sound. Just imagine it. For the first time in months, the noise just stopped. The constant deafening roar of artillery and rifle fire, it all just faded away. This eerie, almost spooky silence fell over the front lines, and for the first time in forever, these soldiers could actually hear something other than the sounds of war. And into that silence, a new sound starts to drift over from the German trenches. It's men singing. They're singing Stille Nacht, and the British soldiers on the other side recognize the melody right away, and so they start singing back in their own language. Silent Night. For that one moment, they weren't enemies. They were just two groups of guys sharing the same Christmas carol across the battlefield. That shared song, that was a spark. What followed was this tentative, absolutely unbelievable move toward peace right there in the middle of that deadly space we just talked about. How did this even begin? Well, it started with little lights appearing on the German trenches, candles, and even tiny Christmas trees. Then came the voices, but instead of insults, they were shouting, "Merry Christmas." And then came the bravest step of all. One soldier, then another cautiously climbed out of their trench and just walked into no man's land. They met in the middle, they shook hands, and they actually saw each other for the first time as people. And what happened next is just incredible. Exchange of little gifts, chocolate for cigarettes, a button off a uniform. They showed each other photos of their families back home. Impromptu soccer games actually broke out in the snow. But they also used this piece for something more solemn. They worked together to bury their dead who had fallen in no man's land. This quote from a soldier really says it all. It felt like a dream, and you can understand why. The experience was so surreal, so totally opposite to their daily life of violence and fear, that it had to feel like a dream. How could any of this possibly be happening? But of course, it was a dream that couldn't last. This spontaneous moment of peace born from the hearts of ordinary soldiers was definitely not part of the plan. When word of this truce got back to the high command on both sides, they were absolutely furious. To them, this wasn't war. This was fraternizing with the enemy. They immediately issued strict orders to get back to fighting because they were scared that if soldiers saw each other as human, they'd lose the will to fight. And the fighting did resume. But it's so important to see that one peaceful night in its devastating context. The truce was a brief, beautiful pause in a war that would rage on for 4 more years and ultimately claim over 16 million lives. It was this tiny island of peace in a vast ocean of war. Why do we still talk about this one event over 100 years later? Because its legacy is so much more than just a single night. It's about the lesson it holds for all of us, even today. The reason we know so many of these amazing details is because of the letters these soldiers sent home, in their own words. That's what preserved this moment, making sure it wasn't just forgotten or dismissed as a myth. Like when this British soldier wrote that it was the most extraordinary Christmas I've ever known. That just hits you. So, what does the Christmas truce teach us? It shows us that our shared humanity can be much stronger than any uniform. That compassion isn't limited by what country you're from. And maybe the most important lesson of all, it reminds us that huge monumental change, even peace, can start with the smallest actions. One song, one candle, one brave step into no man's land. I think it really all boils down to this. On Christmas 1914, when the orders from the top were only to fight, the soldiers on the bottom found a way to create peace. It's just a powerful reminder that even in the absolute darkest of times, our humanity can still find a way to shine through. And that's where we'll leave it. One quiet night, one shared song, and a reminder that even in the middle of humanity's worst moments, something profoundly human can still break through. The Christmas Truce of 1914 didn't end the war, but it showed the world what was possible when people chose empathy over hatred, even if only for a moment. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, take a second to like this video. It really helps the channel. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories from history that remind us who we are and who we can be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for spending a little time on the porch with me. I'll see you next time.